Royce Morales is the founder and teacher of the Perfect Life Awakening program, author, columnist, and expert on mirroring. She empowers clients with her profound process that helps neutralize self-sabotage, shift stuck patterns and negative thinking by locating the origins of limiting, subconscious programmed beliefs. Live an authentic existence. Discover your true purpose. Connect with your higher consciousness. Reset your life. Transform from triggered to empowered and attract what you truly desire and deserve by discovering what life is reflecting to you. Because it's all mirrored.
Hello, welcome to my show. I have a helper today. She decided to be on my lap and we're both wearing hearts. Isn't that cute? So, gosh, it's holiday time and all we do is eat and think about eating and worry that we ate too much and all of that stuff that goes on in holidays. And wow. So I'm going to talk about all that today. And I have a wonderful guest who is an expert on nutrition and what foods symbolize and all kinds of interesting things. And it all goes back to the underlying reasons why we eat. And we're usually not conscious of those reasons. So we're going to talk about that. You know, what are our cravings really trying to say? What are the statements that we're trying to make with our body and even with the food choices that we make? What is food and eating mirroring to us? What about our concern with our body image? I don't think I know anybody that doesn't have concern about their body image. It's something that I have lived my whole life struggling with. And just to tell you a quick story, this is my background. My mother used to brag about the fact that when I was a baby in the high chair, I would be reaching over and grabbing everybody's food off of their plates. And she just thought that was the cutest thing ever. And what she didn't realize was it made a lasting impact in how I perceive myself and how I eat and the food. And because I was getting all this attention for being a little food grabber. And then I became a teenager. And I was probably maybe 10 pounds over my ideal weight. And my mother just went nuts. She took me to a doctor and trying to find out what was wrong with me and put me on all kinds of thyroid medication and all of that stuff. And all I heard about for most of my life was my weight. I would meet her for lunch as an adult. And the first thing she'd say to me is, "Oh, you've gained some weight," or "Oh, you've lost some weight." And it's just something that is so ingrained in us. And it's sadly because food is just this natural thing that we do for survival, but it becomes so symbolic to us and so many things go on about it. So I began, of course, doing a lot of inner work about my relationship with food and my body. And it certainly exposed a lot of issues. It really revealed what my cravings were really about and what my need to be a certain weight was really about. So I'm going to just jump right into my slide presentation about food and mirrors, and let's find out what it is that's going on. So as I always start my little information section about mirroring is explaining basically what mirroring is. There's a universal, unalterable law of energy that states nothing can ever be suppressed. So if you push down something, the other side of the seesaw goes up. So mirroring is what others in life are reflecting to you about what you are suppressing or in denial of about yourself. And the best way to tell that something is a mirror is when a button gets pushed. When you are triggered, there is always a mirror to see. And they're the best tools to wake you up to what you're suppressing about yourself. I think mirrors every single day. So let's go to the next slide and talk about food issues as mirrors. So as I was saying before, what are the underlying reasons that you choose certain foods to eat? And my guest today is going to talk about really kind of minutia about that, which is so interesting. What are the cravings trying to tell you about what you're suppressing? What are the statements that you're trying to make with the food that you're eating? What are food issues and eating mirroring to you? So let's go to the next one. And needless to say, because food equals survival, food issues go deep and they're kind of an addiction, really. It's hard to separate them because they are something that you need to survive versus things like drugs and cigarettes and alcohol that you don't really need to survive. But because of that, they have really deep issues. And a lot of times, superficial food issues cover up deeper ones. So I put an example there. You may think your issue is overeating, but when you do some inner work, you discover that the real issue is about, and I left out the be there, keeping people away. So start to think about what your food issues are really statements of and what they're really about. And let's go to the next one. I always notice typos when I should have noticed them before. So we have conflicting notions about eating because, again, eating food is simply physical survival. But due to those past food experiences, like I shared about my mom, parents, subconscious programming, there's all kinds of conflicts that we have about this simple human activity. So, another example, I must eat to survive, but I must be thin to survive because I believe that I won't get love and attention and approval unless I'm thin. So we've got to discover the subconscious issue. You've got to find the conflict that you're having probably a hard time admitting to. That was hard for me. I couldn't imagine discovering that, wow, well, there's really something else about being thin and keeping that 10 pounds off that I was in denial about. So let's go to the next one. And okay, like I said, we need to discover the real issue. What is it that you're really needing from food and why? And usually it's not what you think. Usually there's some kind of quote reward that goes on about eating. And rewards may sound positive, but they're usually not because they're covering something up. Let's go to that next slide. So here's a list of some subconscious rewards. And basically, a reward looks positive, but it's usually negative in the long run. And they subconscious rewards for food issues as well as for, quote, keeping it under control. We haven't really resolved it, but it looks like, oh, I bypassed that pint of Ben and Jerry's, so I must have it under control. So rewards, for example, I make a statement of some kind, yet I get to suppress myself subconsciously. I get to feel like a victim. I get attention, approval, agreement, pity, love. I get anger, hate, frustration, disapproval from self or others. I used to get that from my mom all the time. I get to hide in my safe, comfy, safe place. I get to cover up my body and not go to the beach. I don't have to take risks. This one is a really big one. And I always talk about this in my presentations, that there's a part of us that has this really deeply suppressed level of guilt for things that we have done that we have, quote, forgotten about. So whatever the food issue going on, it could be trying to keep everybody safe from you. So if I feel like I'm a dangerous person, I need to keep you safe. So I'm going to put on all this weight and keep you away from me. And part of that is we get to be punished for our suppressed and denied and usually subconscious guilt. That both of those really interconnect. Big one in terms of what I teach, spirituality and higher consciousness, we get to prove that we're not higher consciousness, powerful, loving, spiritual beings. As long as I'm safely overeating and staying over here away from everybody, I don't have to be powerful. And I don't have to step up and do my purpose. So those are big rewards. So on the next one, food makes statements. I love that illustration. Food issues are pullbacks to the unresolved past. So maybe you haven't felt emotions all the way through. Maybe you need to feel the love that was attached to the food. Like I was saying about my mom, every time I would eat, it would feel like I'm pleasing her and I'm getting love, even though she was giving me the opposite message. Food issues often make a statement that you didn't allow yourself to make. Um, Maybe it allows me to make a statement toward my husband. I'm really pissed at him, and so I eat to cover all that anger up. And food issues, on some level, are trying to clean up our guilt. Oh, I just gave the same example. Often food issues are an attempt to do what you're unwilling to do in other ways. I'm angry, can't express it, so I eat as a way to get back. Choose the foods that we choose are symbolic. And my guest is going to talk a lot about that because it's so fascinating. So, for example, craving crunchy food could be a way to feel your suppressed anger. So, start to think about what are your cravings trying to tell you about what you're suppressing or needing, and what is the statement that they're making. So, let's go to the next slide. Self-judgment. This was really big for me. Notice what you're saying about your food issue and see what it's really saying. Example, I thought my food issue was to feeling out of control. I just feel out of control, so I eat all the time. But I kept noticing that I was saying, oh, I just hate my body. That was the real issue, hating my body. I was punishing it for some way. I was hating it, trying to make it unhealthy, trying to make it disappear, whatever it is that you're trying to do with the issue is some way a self-judgment about yourself. So take a look at that. And the next one, I think there's next. Yes. I have found that one of the biggest lessons in my life, as I said, starting out my little discussion here, uh, was why was I needing love so much from my family so that I was grabbing food and getting all this attention? So, food issues are great teachers to help us let go of our neediness, our attachments, our expectations, finding joy and fulfillment from within, not from this external thing, whatever it is, whether it be food or whatever. They can help you, our food issues can help us locate our denied self-judgment and our suppressed guilt. I know I say that every single show, but it's so important. What are you truly hiding? And once you realize there's nothing to hide and nothing to hide from, you can forgive yourself and be left with inner peace. So that's called discovering what you did that you're still beating yourself up about, locating it, releasing it, and cleaning it up in some way so you can stop letting those addictions or food do it for you, which is not working, obviously. Food issues can also be part of your higher purpose in some way. Maybe you're here to teach others about nutrition, or teaching others to let go of their food addictions. So it could be giving you a message to inspire learning about something by resolving your issue about food. There's a great story. I read this years ago when I was reading the autobiography of Yogananda, and he talks about, no, it wasn't. It was about, I can't think of who it was about. Gandhi. There we go. It was about Gandhi. A woman came to him with her daughter, and she said, "My daughter is addicted to sugar." And he said to her, "Okay, come back in 3 weeks." So she came back in 3 weeks, and she said to him, "Why did I need to come back in 3 weeks?" And he said, "Because I was addicted to sugar. I needed to resolve my addiction before I could help her with hers." So I think that's just such a beautiful story. And on that note, let me introduce you to my wonderful guest. Let's bring Nicole out. Hello, Nicole. Welcome.
Hey, Royce. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. This is Nicole Kerr, and let me just tell you a little about her. She was on my show a few weeks ago, talking about her near-death experience, which was absolutely fascinating. And in the process of her talking about that, she mentioned something about, I don't even know how we got onto that. She mentioned something about crunchy food and how it could show you your unresolved anger. And I said, I've got to have her on my mirroring show about food because that's what I talk about too. She wrote a book called Eating the Rainbow, lifelong nutritional wellness without lies, hype, or calculus. So she's going to talk about all that. What I think is interesting about the book that she wrote is that most nutrition books prioritize self-image, personal experience, counting calories, and all of that stuff. And that's not at all what her book is about. So first of all, tell us how you got interested in nutrition. What is the story behind that?
Oh, you already nailed it. First of all, thank you so much for having me back. I'm delighted to be with you today and talk about food because we all have to eat to stay alive, and it is on top of mind anytime we travel. And fun fact, the Bible is the number one selling book in the world, but cookbooks are number two. So even
Really?
if we're not cooking, we love to look at food. The food shows are real popular on TV, and we like to see what other people are cooking and all of that. So it definitely is something that we think about, we do, and we talk about. But I got into nutrition, just like you were saying, as a result of trying to fix myself. I developed what was in the 80s known as compulsive overeating. Today it's called binge eating disorder. But in the 80s, they really didn't know what to call it except compulsive overeating. And the only real help back then was 12-step programs, Compulsive Overeaters Overeaters Anonymous, as it was called. But I had this car wreck, and my body was completely disfigured as a result of that from all of the injuries that I sustained. And when I was well enough to get back into school at age 20, I went back to school at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, which is very much focused on your image, how you look. Dallas is I know a lot of people may live in Dallas, but Dallas is a very image conscious city for the most part. And so I was going to school with girls that were all in these sororities and just dressing to the hilt. And I had all these scars, and I had a really, really low self-esteem, terrible body image, like you were talking about. And so I started eating, and I got to a point, and I talk about this in my other book, where on Friday night, I would order Domino's Canadian bacon and mushroom pizza, and I would get my Bluebell caramel turtle fudge or a gallon, sometimes half gallon of ice cream. And I would sit and watch Dallas, and that was followed by Dynasty. And I would just zone out. And I would be so full, and I would feel such remorse and guilt and shame of having binged like that. And I could never purge, because when I was in the hospital, I threw up a lot. So I never was able to do that. But I always just felt just terrible that I hated myself for doing that. And I kept promising myself, okay, tomorrow I'll start the diet, or the next Monday or the new year. Every time was a new beginning. And honestly, I lived with my eating disorder. It got better, but I lived it for 20 years, from age 20 to age 40. And age 40 is when I got married, and a lot of things changed with me then. But a lot of it had to do with my memory coming back at age 36 and realizing what I had been through and why I was treating myself so horribly, and causing what the pain was, the root cause of the pain that I was really trying not to feel. So I decided to go into nutrition to understand why I was eating what I was eating, and why I couldn't stop. And I got my master's in nutrition, got my dietetics license, and my passion was overweight kids and eating disorders. Of course, I'm going to help those that I was trying to help myself with. So I did the whole continuum of eating disorders. And I think most women today in our society struggle with body image and disordered eating. You may be on one end of the spectrum or the other, or in the middle. And most of the time it happens, if not in your early years, like you were saying, your mother was taking you to the doctor. But it will happen at college when you go, and they call it the freshman 15, that you put on weight because you're making your own choices about food, and you're drinking probably a lot more than you would have at home. And so exercising less, you may not be involved in sports like you were in high school. So a lot of things change in your life. And if you don't resolve that, it may lay dormant for a while. And then the behavior may come up again if you've gone on and gotten married and have children. What I'm seeing now is a lot of women whose children have gone on to college or getting married now. The disordered eating patterns are coming back because they never really dealt with the underlying belief systems that caused them to use food in the first place. So we have a lot of women in their 50s, 60s that are using alcohol and food inappropriately.
Yeah. Wow. So tell us about the book.
Yeah, it's called Eating the Rainbow, like you said. And I and my co-author, Dr. Chong, we actually came out with this book before the USDA changed the food guide pyramid into the plate concept. So we talked about how most of us eat, as you can see on here, a lot of meat and a lot of grains and starch and very little vegetables. Okay. And we had recommended way back when that we change it to what we call the international low cost eating style, which is basically, veggies, whole grains and starch, and a little bit of meat. That's how most of the other countries in the world eat. And so in it, I also talk a little bit about eating disorders and making people aware of that. And I talk about understanding what we eat, that it's a combination of economics, because if you look at the obesity rates, they're more prevalent in the South. The poverty levels are more prevalent in the South. It's a lower SES. And people want value for their money in terms of food. So when you go somewhere, remember the all-you-can-eat buffets? Well, my dad used to build the food guide pyramid. That was going to be his one meal of the day, to go to the Golden Corral or any of these buffet places and pile the food on and just have his money's worth, And a lot of people still have that belief system that I need to somehow get the value from the food that I'm eating, so I want to eat as much of it as I can. And so economics are a big driver. And especially during COVID, you saw a lot of fast food places had up to 30, 45 an hour wait for people to go through a drive-through, and people were willing to do that. But the bigger is better phenomenon with food really started with the Wendy's burger meal and the pizza that was, the size of a manhole cover, and all these portion distortions is what I call it. And so we got into this habit of needing to get value in our food. And it's like if somebody ahead of you in a line got more food and they were paying the same price, you feel gypped. So economics is a big player in what we eat. So is socialization. It's a big part of, like you said, the holidays. And, this is the time that we're in. We've gone from Halloween to Thanksgiving to Christmas to New Year's to Super Bowl. That's the biggest pizza selling day in the year is Super Bowl Sunday. And then we carry on with here comes Valentine's and then Easter. So we just roll into the next holiday. So socialization is really, really big in terms of understanding what we eat, but so is religion. Different religions have different customs regarding food. And the last one is emotions. And that's the one I'm going to spend most of the day talking about today, is how food is linked to your emotions. Because foods are coded and they can tell you about yourself. And it's so cool if you can understand how you're using food, the concept of using food as a metaphor for feeling. And so what I want to do, I have taken this from Dr. Anita Johnson, who turned me on to it. She's a psychologist who specialized in eating disorders. And I really want to say, first of all, you need to understand the difference between physical hunger and not. And if you know your cues for physical hunger, then you don't need to go through this metaphoric exercise. Okay. But if you are craving food and you're not hungry, or you're denying yourself food, you need to start exploring these connections with metaphor. And that can help you unravel the true, real hunger issues that are going on in your life. So we're going to start with sweetness. Okay.
So, wait, let's take a break. This is so intriguing, but I know we're going to need to take a break, and I don't want to interrupt you. So
Okay.
why don't we take our little commercial break, and then you can come back and explain all of that, because it just sounds fascinating. We'll be right back. Hang in there.
Om Times TV. Do you want to break free from old patterns and limiting beliefs that subconsciously sabotage your life? What are your triggers, and what really is beneath them? Are you seeking answers to life's big questions, intrigued by the possibility of self-discovery that goes deep? Looking for tools to help you break free from hidden sources of feeling stuck, confused, and unworthy? Perfect Life Awakening takes you on an epic inner adventure that shifts your perception of yourself, others, and life permanently. Identify and overcome the origins of subconscious triggers and limiting beliefs holding you back. That's how you transform your mindset from the roots. That's how you liberate your spirit, awaken your intuition, and discover your true purpose. Dive deep into the mysteries held within. Embark on a life-altering journey of self-discovery. Be a trailblazer within your own life. Go from triggered to empowered because you deserve a perfect life awakening. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Okay, welcome back. You've been holding your breath, waiting to hear what Nicole Kerr has to say. And just to reintroduce you, Nicole Kerr is the author of Eating the Rainbow, and she's about to talk about food symbolism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us.
Yeah. So if you are craving sweetness, you talked about it a little bit earlier, Royce. It is what in my life is not sweet enough? And how am I not sweet enough? So this is about your own self-talk. If you are not being sweet or kind to yourself, okay, you're shooting yourself, or you're criticizing and judging yourself because you didn't do this right or do that right. So you're not being sweet and kind to you. You're going to crave candy, chocolate, all this kind of stuff. And how are others in your family not being sweet to you? So your spouse maybe, hit you with something and you were like, wow, I thought I was being really nice about something and you just attacked me. Or your children, that's a big one, especially the teenagers, how they're not being sweet to you. You're doing all these things for them and they're just not being appreciative. So when you're not giving yourself sweetness or you're not getting it, you're going to create stuff that is sweet, crunchy, salty. So popcorn, chips, tortilla chips, anything that gives you that, that is, like you said, what or who am I angry or frustrated about? And a lot of times that can be your own self. You may not even realize how angry you are at yourself, that you thought you had set a boundary maybe with your family. And then next thing you know, they ran right over that boundary and you let them. So you're angry at yourself. So next thing you know is you are pulling out a bag of Lay's potato chips. And that's true. You can't eat just one. You start eating and before you know it, you've gone through half the bag. Okay. So when you start pulling out that bag of chips, I want you to at least stop and become aware of, what am I really angry about? Because it is anger or frustration that somebody's not listening to me, or they're not hearing me, or they're not respecting me.
Yeah.
Warm foods. Go ahead.
I just want to emphasize, since the show is about mirrors, the real question is, how am I angry at myself? How am I believing that I'm not being sweet to myself or others? And it's
Yeah.
just so important to take it that next step and see what it's about in terms of you believing something about yourself. So, sorry, go ahead.
No, no, and you got your hearts on today. So that really is ultimately loving yourself. Okay. And how do you really love yourself instead of beating yourself up all the time? And that is really a long journey to get through to that point of unconditionally loving yourself. And you have to get rid of the periods in your life where you got stuck in the anger at yourself, maybe because you made a mistake and you have never been able to live it down or whatever. And people are still in your family, like you were saying, going back to triggers about your weight. They don't see you for who you are. It's all about your external appearance, the image. So that's really, really important. So the next food craving, you're craving warm foods all the time. And it's not because it's cold outside. You just want warmth. So where, once again, the emotional mirroring, where do I have emotional warmth in my life? I'm going to say that again. Where do you have emotional warmth in your life? Otherwise, you become very cold.
Yeah. Or could it also be, where am I not feeling emotional warmth for myself?
Right.
That's
exactly. Yes.
that deeper level. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you want to feel warm and snuggly and huggly, you know? And the next one would be spicy. Okay. You really crave spicy foods. So how do you not have enough excitement or stimulation in your life? And what do you need to change in your life? So if you are constantly wanting, you know, the hot salsa or the sriracha, the hot sauce, you know, those kind of things are showing you, what am I doing in my life where I need more stimulation? It's like coming out from the hiding that the food is creating for you. You need more stimulation. You need to be out there more.
So what about culturally? My husband is half Mexican and he loves spicy food.
And
And
that's okay. And once again, it's looking at when you're hungry and you're craving something. Does the first thing that come up for you is spicy foods?
okay.
So
So the
yes,
aspect doesn't
when you're
click.
craving something or you're wanting something or you're denying yourself something, and then the first thing you crave and want to binge on or overeat is spicy food.
Yeah. Okay.
So the last one is chocolate. And chocolate really goes to, what are you craving? It's a mirror for what you need sexually. And also, is there romance in your life? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then they say chocolate is an aphrodisiac, right?
Yes, they do. And it can be. But I want to give you an example of how this process can work. So I had a client recently, and she was eating a pint of Haagen-Dazs chocolate ice cream every other night. And she'd quit spooning it and trying to just eat a couple of bites and then put it in the freezer. So she was now taking the whole container and sitting in front of the TV, and to ensure that she was going to finish it all. And I asked her to describe the ice cream for me. So you have to pretend that I am from Mars, Royce. Okay. And I don't know anything about what ice cream looks like or what it tastes like or anything. So I needed her to give me some adjectives. Describe what chocolate ice cream from Haagen-Dazs is. And she said, okay, it's smooth, it's creamy, it's rich, it's decadent, it's velvety. She said it's sinful. I was like, oh, okay. It's real intense. It had an intense flavor for it. And she said, it's just yummy. Okay. So if you go back to those food cravings that I just mentioned, which ones are the ones that jump out at you? What's the connection there? Sweet?
Sweet. Yeah.
Yeah. And the chocolate. Okay. Right. And from there, we got into a discussion, and she recognized that she was eating this because it was stemming from the loneliness that she felt in her marriage. She was not connected to herself, and she was blaming herself for that disconnect. And there was no romance in her life. It was just going through the motions of daily living. So what I ask people is to deconstruct the food in a metaphor, okay, and give me adjectives for it. And then if you find yourself craving a certain food, go and see if you can really figure out what's going on. And sometimes you may have to write it down. Food journals are great for doing that. And also trying to figure out if you're really hungry or not. Some people actually cannot tell if they're hungry or not. They're just eating because it's 8 o'clock in the morning and that's when the time that they've always had breakfast. So they don't really connect to their gut and listen and see if I'm really hungry. And I will tell you, unless you're diabetic, you need to eat consistently through the day. Or if you have low blood sugar, you need to do that. But otherwise, you need to start retraining yourself to listen to your body's cues for when you're truly hungry. And then when you're not and you're still eating, and I'm telling you, I'm not perfect with this either, okay? And I have been at this my whole career. Just after Christmas, I spoke with my mom who lives in Australia. I haven't talked to her in years. And it usually happens about 24 hours after an event happens. So when you get triggered. So I talked to her on Christmas Eve, Christmas night. We went to friends for dinner. I came home and about 11 o'clock, I got out a bag of potato chips and I started eating them. And I said to myself, whoa, wait a minute, Nicole, what are you doing? What are you angry about? And it went back to my conversation with my mother because she announced that Christmas was a pagan holiday and they are not celebrating it anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was so frustrated with her because she seems to take all the joy out of life with these proclamations when I do talk to her. And I just realized, oh my gosh, instead of really telling her, well, I'm celebrating Christmas. I don't care if it's a pagan holiday or what, I'm still celebrating and I'm putting a Christmas tree up. Instead of that, I listened to her go on and on about negativity around Christmas. And I was so angry that she feels that way. And then I didn't put up my boundary and say, just stop, Mom. I don't want to hear that, and that's what I was eating over because I was full from dinner. We had a nice Christmas dinner, but yet that was happening. So I'm here to tell you, if anybody says, oh, I figured this out 100%, I have all the answers. No, we're human and we're still going to have these episodes or these reoccurrences because the messages are still and the learning is still imparting to you. So please don't beat yourself up when you do have something like this happen, because here I am, I'm 60 years old. And even though my eating disorder has been, quote, in remission and I haven't dealt with it in 20 years, I still will occasionally do something like this, but I have the tools in my toolbox now to help me understand it, peel it back and go, oh, upset. But it was Christmas and I'm not going to get into it with my mother on the phone. So I didn't. And instead I stuffed the anger. So just wanted to confess.
You're forgiven. Yeah, it's interesting because like I was saying, it goes so deep, especially with our parents. They have the ability to trigger us like nobody else. So
they installed the buttons. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I want to talk about something else, Royce, that I don't know if you're familiar with, but it's about odors in food and the connection between that. And, we joke, but perhaps it isn't the sight of food that causes the overeating. It may be the aroma that is the conditioned response. And 90% of taste is smell. Okay. I don't know if you guys know that, but by the age of 65, 50% of us experience some loss to detect and identify odors. And by 80 years old, that goes up to 75%. And as we get older, a lot of people lose their appetites, right? That's one of the things you see with elderly people. And it's because they're losing the ability to smell. And so what I talk to people about is with dairy in particular, think about what is the odor of milk? Just a glass of plain milk. Can you describe that for me, Royce? What would you think the odor would be?
Nothing.
That's exactly right. Milk, if you really think about it and smell it, it really doesn't have an odor. Yeah. So mozzarella cheese, do you think that has much of an odor?
I'm not a cheese eater, so I don't know, but I would assume not much.
Okay. And your mild cheeses, cheddar mild, things like that, Monterey Jack, they don't have much of a smell. Yeah. But if I told you, here, smell this blue cheese or gorgonzola or feta, you would take one whiff of that blue cheese and you go, whew, that's enough. So when we are eating pizzas, think about the cheese they put on that, mozzarella. It has no odor. So when you're eating that, you go, why am I eating 3 pieces of pizza? It's because if that had blue cheese on it instead of mozzarella, you would smell that cheese and you would only eat 1 piece because it is so pungent. And I tell people that the food companies deliberately put these non-odorous toppings on stuff so that you're not smelling it. And same with like vanilla ice cream. It has no odor. So you can wind up eating the whole thing before you're actually realizing, oh my God, there was no smell to this that would trigger my olfactory receptors in my nose to signal to my brain, hey, you're starting to get full. That just doesn't happen. So you're going to eat continuously. The same thing around a buffet table. If you go to the cheese that's out there, if you're not going to eat a really strong cheese, you're going to wind up going back and getting 5 or 6 or maybe 10 more cubes of the mild cheddar, the Monterey Jack, or even brie. That it doesn't have much of a smell to it. So I tell people to be aware of that when they're eating dairy, and if they're having a salad and they put cheese in it, put a real strong cheese in it, and you won't eat as much of the cheese. And it really does work. And we have to really remember that smell is the biggest component of taste, and to smell your foods and let that smell take time to get up to your brain, and your brain to start going, oh, the satiety part will start kicking in. So here's some fun facts. Green apple, that smell. I don't know if you remember Jolly Ranchers green apple, the little hard candies.
Oh yeah.
Actually, green apple, that smell reduces anxiety, and it can help prevent migraines, and it can lower your blood pressure. Also, peppermint and jasmine, the smell of those are real stimulating. And pumpkin pie infused with lavender, guess what? It arouses men. So ladies, bake a pumpkin pie, or cinnamon buns. That's another one. The smell of cinnamon buns really arouses men. And cucumber and Good and Plenty, if you remember that, that's what the data is showing arouses women. So that's a real kind of sidebar fun fact about odor and dairy in particular. So if you get a pizza, maybe add a more potent cheese to it and you'll eat less of it.
That is so fascinating. It really is.
Yeah.
Wow. So what about, you mentioned food journaling. Tell us about that. How does that work?
Well, it's a great tool to help you figure out your food patterns. And if you can, there are apps that you can track your food on. I like to handwrite things. There's something about the process of writing something down with your on paper. But if you start recording the time that you're eating, what you're eating, the amount you're eating, because that's a really important data point, is the amount you're eating. And also time, because if you're going too long, that's going to trigger you to overeat. There's an old saying back in the 12-step program that says, halt, don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Because if you get any one of those, you're going to overeat. So don't set yourself up in the beginning with one of those factors. And it's true. If I get too tired, I'll eat whatever, it's just give me something. And then if I'm hungry, if you are really hungry, you're going to overeat if you haven't allowed yourself to eat prior to that, maybe just a little nibble of something to keep your blood sugar up as well. But the food journal, you can put your thoughts down, the feelings and the behaviors that are occurring prior and during the eating event. And I say prior because I mentioned, like with me, I had the conversation with my mother on Christmas Eve, and I ate on Christmas Day that evening. So it usually takes about 24 hours for you to emotionally process something that's happened, and really the trigger shows up. So I always go back a day or two with clients and say, what was going on then? Because that was the triggering event. And it just took about 24 hours to come out in the behavior. But you can, like I said, there's Fitbit, there's several programs online that you can do this if you would prefer it. But just do it for, a couple of weeks and just start seeing what your pattern is. And also make sure that you're doing weekdays and include the weekends, because we eat differently on the weekend than we do during the weekday. So you want to start seeing what your consistent patterns are. And are you craving the same thing? Are you in a food jag? Meaning, are you eating the same thing for breakfast every single morning? Kids usually get into these food jags a lot and they outgrow it, but some don't. And I have to tell parents, you may have to reintroduce a food up to 7 times. Just don't, after the first attempt and they say, I don't like it, go, okay, you never have to eat that again. And I see this with vegetables a lot, with adults and children, is they like, I don't want it. And the parent doesn't ever reintroduce the food. So give it to them in a different format, maybe mix it with something else and try it again. But please don't give up after the first time. And I tell people about eating the rainbow, and it's so funny because I will have kids that will go, well, I had Skittles for breakfast, or I had Fruit Loops. And I'm like, okay, that is not the rainbow. But that's what kids today eat, such a high, and adults too, ultra now. They got ultra high processed foods that they are really just eating chemicals all day long. They're not even getting foods and the correct nutrients. Yeah. So we have got a massive issue in our country with the way our food is produced, and it is not for our health. It is for profit over the health, and it is causing us a lot of dis-ease.
Yes. Can we go back? Yeah. Can we go back a minute to the journaling? I just think it's interesting that you have not once mentioned the word calories. And I think that's really important because one of my closest friends is always on a diet, always. And she's gone to various programs. And what she does is she keeps track of every single calorie that she eats. And she's not allowed to go past a certain number and all of that. And it never works, but she does it. So what do you tell people about calorie counting?
I tell them, don't worry about the calories. Okay. Right. Because in my mind, I don't want you obsessed about numbers, because if you're having to count calories that causes the obsession to get fueled and you're giving more energy to it. The same thing with the scale. I will tell you, scales are for fish. And what you need to do is understand that your percentage of body fat is more important than your weight, because muscle weighs more than fat. So if you're a muscular person and you're overweight, you're going to have less body fat. So please, that's why, it's important to look at inches lost instead of just weight loss. And when people are first starting out on a diet, most of that weight loss is water, and and then you'll start losing muscle if it's too fast. And I don't talk about calories because I want people to get back to a healthy relationship with food. And I don't say it's a bad food or a good food. I say it's healthy and unhealthy. And we are human, so we're all going to want unhealthier foods at some point, just like the holidays. Do not deny yourself, okay? Because we as humans do not like self-imposed restriction. And when we restrict ourselves or deny ourselves, it's going to flip-flop and it's going to come back and you're going to binge. I'm telling you, the amount of deprivation is equal to the amount you're going to binge on Haagen-Dazs, pizza, all these comfort foods that are really, really high in fat. If you're craving comfort food, there's a reason why, okay? You have to get back and you have to do that detective work to uncode it and start looking at yourself. And that is, like you were saying with diets, look at the first 3 words of that. It's spelled die, and you are dying to get off of that diet. So I don't even talk about diets anymore. And when they tell me, oh, Scarsdale diet's coming back and all these diets, I'm like, they don't work. They're temporary fixes. And you have got to learn the underlying root issues that are causing you to overeat, to pick ultra processed foods. Yes, food is addictive because the food companies have figured out the right combinations of sugar, fat, and salt to keep you addicted. And it is an issue. And so those 4 little baby blue, pink, yellow, I forgot the color of the other one, those artificial sweeteners, they were actually designed, sweet and low equal, I forgot the yellow one. But anyway, they're all designed to be artificial sweeteners, and they're designed to mimic sweetness at up to 20 to 30 times sweeter than the actual sweet level is. So you will get your threshold for sweetness starts increasing. You can tolerate more sweetness. And if you take yourself off of that, if you take yourself off of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, these carbonated sugar sweetened beverages, you will start knowing if you've been off of them for a couple of months and then you go back to it again. Oh my God, it's like disgusting. You're like, oh, how could I ever have drunk this?
How could I have ever drunk that? Yes, I had that happen. Yes.
So, and the kids too, look at what these kids are drinking, and these monster drinks and Red Bull. I mean, that is just sugar and caffeine hiked up high. And we certainly don't need the sugar, and we certainly don't need the added caffeine. You need to look at what you need to do to start getting the rest and to be able to manage a busy schedule if that's why you're keeping yourself up with. So, we use food inappropriately. Food basically is fuel for us, and we've attached it to so many different other things. And if we can just get back to that remembrance, yes, enjoy your food. And that's not in our dietary guidelines. There's nothing about really enjoying your food and being mindful of what you're eating. We eat in front of the television, we eat in the car as we're driving. I tell people, if you're going to eat in the car, you pull over and you turn off the car, or you sit with the heater going on and you sit there and you eat your hamburger and you enjoy it. Okay. Don't eat as you're driving, because you're going to eat the hamburger in 3 bites and then you're going to still be hungry. You're not going to even, your brain doesn't even have time to get that satiety signal going. Yep, we're full. So, it's things like this that we have to start being more mindful of and pay attention to in ourselves, and to realize that you're connecting, being grateful for whatever food you're eating, the source of it, and bless the food. I'm all about prayer. Prayer is energy. So bless that food. It can help change the energy of it when you eat it.
Yeah. I think what you just said is so important. I was thinking about how mindless we are when we eat. I used to watch a lot of cooking shows, and always when the chef prepares something and they give it to whoever they give it to, the person takes one bite, and you can just see that they're really experiencing it and enjoying it, or hating it or whatever, but they experience it, and they often don't take that second bite, and it's, that if we were able to do that when we eat, it's like to really experience each bite, and to be grateful and mindful and all of that stuff that you were just saying. I think that's so important.
And I will tell you one last trick that I do is I will put chocolate, like the little Hershey Kisses or the little Dove pieces. I'll put them in the freezer. And then if I want something sweet, I will get that out, and I will see, first of all, time yourself and see how long you can keep that in your mouth. See if you can keep it there 3 minutes or even 4 minutes. Okay. And just really roll it around your tongue and your mouth and savor that one kiss, and time yourself and write that down. And then the next time you want something sweet, you do the same thing. Okay. And what you're doing, you're not going to go crunch, because you're going to break your tooth on that. So don't do that, but let it melt in your mouth, and you will realize you don't want to eat 4 or 5 of them. Whereas if they were at room temperature, you would have eaten 4 or 5 of them. 5 of them.
That's a great message. And what about, we only have like a couple minutes here. What about intuitive eating? Just kind of intuitively knowing what your body needs versus craving.
Oh, absolutely. But it takes a while to get to the intuition, because you usually have to clear a couple of other layers of how to trust yourself. It's your relationship with your body. And like you see, body image has a visual component, a mental, an emotional, and a kinesthetic component. And that visual is how you see yourself when you look at the mirror. So it is so, so important to start that relationship between your self-talk and your body, and intuitively trusting what's coming up, because a lot of times we've been taught to dismiss it and to trust that usually when there's food issues, there's probably abuse issues along the way, and probably sexual abuse issues. So women don't want their self to become, like you were saying, thinner, because then they'll be attracted to men. So there's a whole level underneath that that's usually happening unconsciously, that there's a reason why you're keeping the weight on. And the other part that I've seen in my practice is women who had abortions who never processed the abortion. They had it and they went on with life, and they're mimicking that belly fat in the front is the unprocessed abortion.
Wow. Oh, what an important statement.
So intuitive eating, I'm all for it, but it usually takes a little while to get there. So in the meantime, these are some other things to be doing.
We have like 30 seconds. Tell people how to reach you and tell the title of your book.
Yeah. So the title of my book is Eating the Rainbow. And actually it's available on Smashwords for free, and the digital component of it. And it's basically a basic nutrition book with a couple of things in about the eating. And you can find me on my website at www.nicolekerr.com. And I really am focused now more on the spiritual wellness component of the wellness journey. But I also include, if people are struggling with food, I will include that as well to help us get to the spiritual stuff, because you have to get rid of the elephant in the room, right? To start unpacking this. Yes. So you can find me on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Yeah. I hope that helps you guys.
Okay. And you take care of yourself and go have one of your frozen chocolate pieces.
I've got them in there. They're waiting for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.